They say some deaths are silent. Mine happened at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday. No warning, no heads up. Just a calendar invite titled Quick Sync and a room that smelled like betrayal wearing cologne. He walked in like he owned the oxygen, because technically now he did. Colin Whitmore, freshly minted MBA, legacy bloodline, jawline you could hang a towel on, and a chip on his shoulder big enough to qualify as carry-on luggage. He sat at the head of the table like it had been waiting for him his whole life. Leaned back in his navy blazer. No tie, no notes. Just arrogance served cold. "Let's not waste time," he said, sipping some neon green energy drink like it was a birthright. "I've reviewed the org chart. There's a lot of legacy fat here, redundancy, people who've been here too long doing too little." Then he turned to me. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but strategic vendor relations as a function will be sunsetting." Sunsetting. Like I was a beach photo on Instagram. I didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared at the dot on his expensive Italian loafers, wondering how many people he'd step on before breakfast. He didn't know, or care, that I'd been with the company for 14 years, that I built our vendor network from napkins and red-eye flights, that I'd negotiated our freight contracts during a pandemic while my mother was dying in ICU. He wasn't there for the floods, the shortages, the fire in Sector B that almost wiped our West Coast fulfillment. But I was. I was the one who rerouted everything in under 48 hours. The one who stayed on the phone until my voice gave out. The one who turned a third-tier shipping firm into our lifeline. Colin didn't know any of that. All he knew was that his dad had stepped down for a sabbatical in Switzerland, and now he was streamlining operations. Translation: cutting out the people who made him uncomfortable because they remembered when he still had braces and called Excel confusing. I nodded. That was it. Didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't beg. He slid the folder across the table with a smile that said he thought this was a mercy kill. 6 months severance, he said. Generous, I think. You've been solid. Not great, not essential, just solid. Like a forgotten support beam in a building no one questions until the ceiling caves in. I signed the paper with the same hand that once closed a $4.2 million vendor contract without legal review. That pen felt heavier than anything I'd lifted in years. I left the room with a smile painted over fire. Didn't look back. Walked past every desk and every intern who owed their training to my slides. Past the receptionist I'd bought lunch for last week when her card declined. Past the mural I commissioned from a local artist for our 5-year anniversary, now covered by a vision statement poster. I went home, poured wine, the good kind, the one I was saving for something big. Well, this was it. And then I opened the other folder, the one in my home safe, the one labeled break in case of ego-driven nepotism. Inside, a contact, a name, a company, Viridian Freight Logistics, our biggest supplier. 71% of all outbound fulfillment ran through them. Quiet, small-scale, family-owned. They never made the press. But they always made the deadline. What Colin didn't know, because he'd never cared to ask, was that last year, their founder, Walter, told me he was looking to retire. No heirs, no board, just him and a spreadsheet full of invoices. He said if I ever wanted to talk, he'd listen. So I called. He picked up on the second ring. Rachel? Walter, you still thinking of stepping down? There was a pause, a smile in his voice. You still thinking of stepping up? I checked my bank account, did some math. Severance, personal savings. The crypto wallet I'd forgotten about until 2 months ago. I'm not just stepping up, I said. I'm buying in. Silence. Then, come by Monday morning. We'll talk numbers. You'll like the view. I hung up and felt it in my spine. The shift. I hadn't just lost a job. I'd been handed an opportunity in disguise. A quiet weapon. A chance to own what he never understood. And come Monday, Colin was going to learn that some legacy staff don't go quietly. Sometimes they walk out the front door and come back through the freight entrance. I didn't sleep that weekend. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't. I was restless, like I could feel something massive shifting beneath my feet. A tectonic plate of every gritted teeth meeting, every late-night negotiation, every ignored email where I warned exactly what would happen if they let idiots near the supply chain. Colin thought he'd erased me with a signature, but all he did was free my hands. By Sunday morning, I'd run the numbers 10 different ways. If I liquidated my dormant investment account, combined my severance, and cashed out a small inheritance I'd been sitting on, just enough to feel guilty about, but never enough to make real moves, I could cover the offer Walter had hinted at last year. 51%. Not a majority share in some tech startup or media agency. Majority ownership in Viridian Freight Logistics, the literal backbone of Colin's inherited empire. I drove 2 hours out to Walter's office Monday morning. No logos, no glass walls, no tech bros in Allbirds pacing with oat milk lattes. Just a squat building with rusted signage and a vending machine that hadn't worked since 2018. Walter met me in the parking lot. He was wearing a faded polo and khakis that had survived at least 2 decades of warehouse life. He looked exactly the same as he did the last time I saw him. Like a man who hated small talk and trusted paper more than people. "Still drink black coffee with 1 sugar?" he asked. "Only when I want to impress someone." He barked a laugh. "Then you're in luck. The Keurig died last month." We went inside. His office hadn't changed. File cabinets, shipping manifests, a dusty globe on the corner desk. He slid a folder toward me. "Here's the offer. Includes our asset list, debt, real estate holdings, client spread, all of it. You'll take over operations, but I'll stay on for 6 months to transition." I scanned the first few pages. My heart picked up. The numbers weren't just manageable. They were smart. Clean margins, predictable growth, a few aging trucks I could replace within a year. "Why me?" I asked, finally. He leaned back. "Because you're the only one who treated us like people, not leverage." That hit harder than I expected. He added, "Colin's people don't even know who we are. They think freight moves itself. You knew which driver had a kid in the NICU and which route was closed for bridge repairs without ever asking." I signed the papers that afternoon, transferred the funds by wire before I even left the building. By 3:41 p.m., I owned 51% of Viridian Freight. I didn't gloat. I didn't call anyone. I didn't update LinkedIn with a smug new title. I just drove home, made dinner like any other Monday, and stared at the quiet realization that my future no longer belonged to someone else's quarterly budget. Colin had no idea. That's what made it so satisfying. He still thought I was jobless, probably picturing me crying in a bathrobe, binge-watching reality shows while my severance slowly disappeared. He hadn't even bothered to disable my email until Friday. Classic amateur move. The real win wasn't just ownership, it was positioning. Whitmore Corp., his newly streamlined empire, depended on Viridian for 71% of its outbound volume. That's everything from pharmaceuticals to home appliances. They'd built entire quarterly forecasts assuming we'd continue our long-term contract unchanged. Now I controlled the bottleneck, but I didn't plan to use it. Not yet. Because revenge without precision is just noise. Instead, I reviewed the vendor contracts one by one. I met with the dispatch team, the route managers, the warehouse foremen who'd been working here since I was in high school. I asked real questions, listened, learned. My plan wasn't just to get even. It was to build something smarter, tighter, more resilient. Colin was playing a zero-sum game. I was building the board. But then, on Friday, something strange happened. My phone rang. Block number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Same number. And finally, a text. Urgent. From the board. You need to call us back. My stomach dropped. Because no one said from the board unless something was about to go nuclear. I called back. The voice that answered was Margaret Lynn, a senior board member at Whitmore Corporation. I'd only spoken to her once, years ago, during a contract renegotiation. "Rachel," she said, "we need to speak, in person, immediately." I kept my voice even. "Everything all right?" There was a pause. "You've caused a bit of a stir." I played dumb. "I've been enjoying some time off." Another pause. Then carefully, "Did you purchase a controlling interest in Viridian Freight?" Silence. I looked out the window. The trucks were still moving. Nothing had changed. Except everything. "I did," I said. There was shuffling in the background, raised voices. Then I heard it. Faint but unmistakable. "You fired our owner?" Then the line cut. The silence after the call was louder than any boardroom shouting match I'd ever heard. I stared at my phone for a long time, listening to the hum of the warehouse below my office, the low rumble of forklifts, the echo of voices, the quiet rhythm of things that still worked because I did. "You fired our owner?" The words played again in my mind like a movie trailer for something explosive. And this time, I didn't flinch, because I knew what came next. Power doesn't vanish. It scrambles. It clutches. It spins. It sends emails labeled urgent and meetings that weren't on the calendar. And just before noon, it came for me. A black SUV pulled up outside Viridian. 3 men in suits stepped out. One I recognized. Gregson, Whitmore Corp's head of procurement. The other 2 wore those government-adjacent expressions you only see in people who know how fast things can fall apart. They didn't come through the front door. They walked around back, past the loading docks, past the vending machines, right into the operations wing, bold, fast, nervous. Someone knocked on my office door before I saw them. My logistics coordinator, Paula, whispered, "You've got visitors." I stood. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't straighten my jacket. I walked down the hallway like it was just another day. "Rachel," Gregson said the moment he saw me, voice already tight. "We weren't expecting this." "Ownership?" I said. I wasn't either, but sometimes opportunity looks like an insult. He tried to smile. Failed. "The board didn't know. Colin didn't know." "That much is obvious," I said. "But the paperwork is signed. It's done." One of the suits cleared his throat. "We need to understand your intentions. You now control the logistics network for the majority of Whitmore's national distribution. That makes you a significant variable." I held his gaze. "I'm not a variable. I'm a constant. You just didn't see me before." Gregson stepped in, trying to find stable ground. "Are you planning to disrupt existing service levels?" I shrugged. "Are you planning to insult me again and expect nothing changes?" He didn't respond. "Look," I added, "I'm not trying to sabotage anything. If you maintain your end of the contract, we'll do the same. Viridian will operate professionally, transparently, and on schedule." "But?" he asked, because there always is one. I didn't smile. "But there will be no shortcuts. No cost-cutting behind my back. No pivoting to cheaper vendors without notice while I carry the burden of your volume. I'm not your supplier now. I'm your partner. And you'll treat me like one." He looked at me like I'd changed languages, because in his world, partnerships were reserved for people with stock options and golf memberships. Not for the woman who used to send emails marked high importance and get ignored. "Understood," he said finally. The suits nodded. One scribbled something in a leather notebook. They left without shaking my hand. I sat at my desk and let the silence settle again. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered this time. "Rachel." It was Margaret Lynn again. No preamble. "I assume you've been briefed," I said. "You've turned the company upside down." "No," I replied. "Colin did that. I just flipped it right side up." She exhaled, slow. "He's not handling it well." I'm not shocked. There was a long pause. Then she asked, "Would you be willing to meet?" Privately, off the record. My stomach tightened. Why? Because some of us on the board remember how this place actually ran before the sons of CEOs started calling shots. And because, quite frankly, we're scared of what happens if Colin keeps pretending he understands freight. I didn't answer right away. Tomorrow, 8:30, Hotel Sheridan, Conference Room B. Bring documentation, bring facts. I hung up and leaned back. And just like that, the game changed again. Because I wasn't just the woman they fired. I was now the person they needed. But I knew better than to celebrate. People don't like their power questioned, especially when it comes from someone they dismissed. That night, Colin broke his silence. He posted a company-wide memo. The kind wrapped in corporate perfume and disguised as transparency. We value all our partners and remain committed to the strategic vision of Whitmore Corp's next chapter. Any recent organizational changes are in alignment with long-term goals. No mention of me. No mention of the ownership change. Just fear, thinly veiled as vision. He didn't see me as a threat yet. He still thought this was a bad dream. Something he could spin into a hiccup at next quarter's town hall. But it wasn't. Because I had the numbers. I had the contracts. And now, I had the board's attention. Come morning, I'd walk into that conference room not as an employee, not as a vendor, but as the storm they never saw coming. The Hotel Sheridan was beige in the way expensive places always are. Quiet, neutral, and designed to make power feel comfortable. I arrived at 8:22 a.m., exactly 8 minutes early. I wasn't interested in showing up like I was nervous, but I wanted to walk in composed, unrushed, like someone who wasn't here for permission, just clarity. Conference Room B was tucked at the end of a marble hallway lined with art you couldn't name, but knew cost more than your car. The door was open. Inside sat Margaret Lynn. She wore a navy pantsuit and glasses with thin silver frames. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't look surprised to see me. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Coffee?" she asked. "No thanks," I said. "Let's get to it." She nodded. "Good, because this isn't just a check-in. It's a temperature read." I opened the folder I'd brought with me. 3 neatly stacked pages, nothing more. But every line carried weight. Viridian Freight, I began, currently services 71.3% of Whitmore Corp's domestic outbound volume. Contracts are valid through Q4 of next year, with escalation clauses that I now control. She didn't blink. We're aware. I've inherited a profitable, scalable operation. Our lead time is better than anyone in your rotation. And until last week, Whitmore's procurement team had no issues with our service. And yet, she said, here we are. I nodded. Because Colin didn't just remove me. He destabilized your distribution chain and created a liability none of you planned for. I wasn't dead weight. I was the balance point. She leaned back, thoughtful. So what do you want, Rachel? That question. The one everyone asks when a woman takes power unexpectedly. Like it couldn't just be competence. There had to be an agenda. I exhaled slowly. I want Whitmore to honor its existing terms. No interference. No sudden reassessments. I won't tolerate pressure or delay tactics. She nodded slowly, then added, And Colin? I met her eyes. He's your problem, not mine. A pause, the kind that hums with implications. He's already talking to legal, she said, claiming conflict of interest, speculating sabotage. That's not surprising, I said. But there's no case. Everything I've done is documented and legal. His mistake was thinking I was disposable. Mine would be assuming he'll take this lying down. She gave a dry smile. He won't. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. She folded her hands. If he tries to terminate the Viridian contract early, we'll lose 6 months of supply coverage. Procurement has no alternate solution. No infrastructure. You know that. That's not my concern, I replied. But I won't allow him to bully his way through this. I'm not an employee anymore. I'm a stakeholder. She looked at me for a long time. Then, finally, she reached into her bag and slid a white envelope across the table. I frowned. What's this? Internal audit request. The board's quietly launching a review of all vendor relationships initiated by Colin in the past 12 months. I opened the envelope. There it was. 4 pages, stamped and initialed. The same kind of document that could end a career before HR ever got involved. You're going after him? I asked. She shrugged. We're protecting the company. If that means he goes down with it, so be it. I studied her for a moment. Margaret had always seemed like a background presence, but now I saw it clearly. She wasn't passive. She was surgical. Why tell me this? I asked. Because you're in this story whether you like it or not. You can help control the fallout, or become a casualty of it. I didn't answer. Not immediately. Because I knew the risk. Colin wouldn't go quietly. He had the name, the access, the paranoia. And people like that? They'd rather burn the ship than admit they were never steering. By noon, word had spread. My phone buzzed with messages. Former coworkers, vendors, even 2 junior analysts who used to shadow me asking if the rumors were true. But the one that mattered came at 12:47 p.m. from Colin Whitmore. Subject: cease and desist. Notice I opened it. Effective immediately, you are to halt all communication with current Whitmore Corp employees regarding internal operations, supplier arrangements, or matters related to proprietary information. It was laughable, and also calculated. He wanted me scared, cornered, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I replied with a single sentence. You should probably speak to your board before you dig this hole any deeper. And then I forwarded Margaret a copy. Later that evening, I got another email. Not from Colin, from legal. Subject: Whitmore Corp. v. Rachel Liu. Preliminary review. No body text, just the title. South. This was how he wanted to play it. Fine. He'd fired me thinking I was powerless. Now he was trying to sue the woman who controlled his supply chain. But there was one thing he didn't know. I had the receipts, and tomorrow I'd bring them. By sunrise, I was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't taste and 3 open laptops in front of me. The cease and desist was a warning shot. The lawsuit? That was war. Colin didn't want to win. He wanted to stall. Tie me up in court. Freeze Viridian's contract pipeline. Scare other partners into backing off. If he couldn't stop me through control, he'd try fear. And I knew how that game was played. Because I'd seen fear before. In vendors who were late on payments, in warehouse managers right before budget cuts, in employees being escorted out with boxes and questions no one would answer. But I wasn't afraid now. I was furious. So I got to work. By noon, I had compiled over 30 documents, time-stamped emails, screenshots, vendor logs, meeting notes from the last 18 months, every single one showing that Viridian had operated fully above board, and that I, even as an employee, had made no moves toward ownership until after termination. The best part? The paper trail showed Colin had been reviewing vendor costs for months, and that he'd tried to initiate a transition away from Viridian without board approval, even while claiming publicly that contracts were stable. That wasn't just incompetence. That was liability. At 3:15 p.m., I walked into my attorney's office. Eliza Hart. Sharp, calm, and dangerous in heels. She'd handled 2 whistleblower cases and a high-profile breach of contract suit against a Fortune 100 company. All wins. She scanned the lawsuit, then the documents I handed her, one eyebrow slightly raised. He really tried it, huh? He thinks he's untouchable, I said. She smirked. Good. Arrogance makes my job easier. We spent 3 hours drafting a response, a mix of legal defense and quiet aggression. But the real weapon? A countersuit, defamation, malicious interference, contract disruption. And because he initiated legal proceedings first, I was now fully justified in submitting evidence that otherwise would have stayed buried. "This won't just block him," Eliza said. "It'll expose him." I nodded. "Good." The board had tried to protect him quietly. Let him fumble his way out with a severance and a soft press release. But now? Now he'd gone public. That night I received a calendar invite. Subject: Emergency Session, Whitmore Board of Directors. Time: tomorrow, 9 a.m. Location: Whitmore Tower, executive level. They didn't even bother to blind copy the invite list. 21 names, including Colin, and me. I slept 4 hours, woke up twice. The second time, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thinking of every moment I'd been dismissed, minimized, talked over, talked down to. And now they wanted me in the tower. Not through the back door, not in the freight wing, at the table. I arrived at 8:55 a.m. Sharp, no assistant, no fanfare. Just a black folder in hand and a purpose that felt like armor. The executive boardroom was cold, oversized, polished oak, glass walls. Colin sat 2 seats down from the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes dark. Margaret sat at the end. She didn't smile, just nodded toward the empty chair across from Colin. I sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the legal counsel cleared his throat. "We're here to address the escalating conflict between Whitmore Corporation and Ms. Rachel Liu, particularly surrounding her recent acquisition of Viridian Freight and the resulting contractual tension." Colin jumped in. "She blindsided us. She used her position to get insider knowledge and then undermined our procurement operation." I stayed silent. Let him talk. "She coordinated with our supplier, after her termination, to disrupt operations. That's corporate sabotage, and we have the right to protect the company." Then Eliza spoke. Cool, calm. "Actually, your son unilaterally terminated Ms. Liu without board consultation, thereby nullifying any ongoing insider status. The acquisition occurred weeks after separation, and we have records showing he had already been attempting to dissolve the Viridian contract prior to her involvement." She opened the black folder and slid copies down the table, one to every board member. Emails, memos, budget discussions, and a proposal draft dated before Rachel's departure. All signed by Colin, all without oversight. The board went quiet. One member, a man I didn't recognize, muttered, "This is bad." Colin tried to recover. "Even if that's true, she's exploiting the company's dependency. It's unethical." I leaned forward for the first time. What's unethical is assuming I'd stay quiet. What's unethical is firing someone who built your supply chain from scratch and thinking that somehow ends the story. I didn't create your dependency. I protected it. You destroyed that trust. I just bought what you no longer respected. The room held its breath. Then Robert Whitmore, Colin's father, founder of the company, spoke for the first time. He'd joined by video call. His face appeared on the wall monitor, older than I remembered, but sharp. "Colin," he said, "you told me this was under control." Colin froze. "It's not," Robert said, "and it hasn't been for a while." Then he turned to the camera. "Rachel," he said, voice slow but firm. "What would it take for this to end without further damage?" I could have asked for anything in that moment, but I already knew the answer. There was a long silence after Robert Whitmore asked me what it would take to end this. I looked around the boardroom, the same room I used to walk past with my badge clipped to my belt and a vendor file under my arm. I used to wonder what decisions were made in there, what it would feel like to sit at that table. Now I knew. It didn't feel like power. It felt like damage control. I placed both hands on the polished oak and said clearly, "I don't want a payout. I don't want silence money. And I don't want Colin in my inbox ever again." Murmurs across the table. "I want a public, notarized statement from Whitmore Corp acknowledging the change in ownership at Viridian Freight, affirming our partnership and confirming that no legal action will be pursued against me or Viridian moving forward." Robert nodded once. And, I continued, I want Colin's resignation. Effective immediately. No vague titles, no consultant roles. I want his access revoked and his name removed from any strategic procurement decisions. Colin sat up, red-faced. You're joking. No, I said calmly. You gambled with other people's jobs. You fired me without cause, and now you're being held accountable. It's called a consequence. This is a hostage demand, he shouted. It's called accountability, Margaret said from the head of the table. Her voice, low but steel-edged, cut through his panic. The room grew quiet. Then Robert, still on video, exhaled and said, Colin, step outside. I'm not. Now. Colin stood, visibly shaking, and walked out the door without another word. When it clicked shut behind him, Robert looked directly at the camera. The board will take your request under advisement. You'll have an answer within 24 hours. I stood. You have 12. And I left. I didn't say goodbye. That night, I didn't open wine. I didn't turn on music. I didn't even speak to anyone. I just sat on my balcony, the city lights humming beneath me, and thought about everything that had led to that moment. 14 years, late flights, missed birthdays, vendor calls in hospital parking lots. Not a title, not a promotion, not a word of recognition. But in the end, I didn't need them to name me. I named myself. The next morning, 9:43 a.m., I received a certified email. Subject: Whitmore Board Resolution. I opened it. Effective immediately, Colin Whitmore has stepped down from his role at Whitmore Corp. The board formally recognizes Rachel Liu as the majority owner of Viridian Freight and reaffirms the company's ongoing partnership. All legal proceedings initiated by former management have been withdrawn. There was no apology. Just facts. That was enough. By noon, it was in the press. Whitmore shakeup, CEO's son ousted after vendor power shift. Former executive turned owner reclaims her seat. I didn't give a statement. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke for me. Within 2 weeks, Viridian secured 3 new contracts, partners that had been watching the storm, waiting to see if I'd survive it. The moment I did, they picked up the phone. 2 of my former colleagues reached out and asked if we were hiring. One of them had been in the room when Colin fired me. I said yes, not out of pettiness, but because some people deserve a second chance. Others don't. 3 weeks later, I walked past Whitmore Tower. It looked the same. Glass, steel, ambition in concrete form. But something had changed. Not the building. Me. I didn't stop. I didn't look up. I just kept walking. That night, I pulled an old note out of my desk drawer. Something I'd written years ago in a moment of burnout, right before an all-hands call no one would remember. It said, "Someday I'll leave, and they won't notice until they have to pay for it." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I threw it away. Because they had noticed, and they had paid for it. But that wasn't the story anymore. This is, sometimes you give a company everything, and they still choose someone who's louder, younger, or better connected. They call it strategy. But it's not. It's blindness. And sometimes the person they underestimated becomes the person they depend on. Not out of revenge, out of necessity. And if you're lucky, or just prepared, you don't burn the bridge. You buy the river underneath it.